Again, my name is Simran and I'm with CANOPY. CANOPY is a co-working space that's based in San Francisco. I'll put a link to our space in the chat so you can come check us out and hit the tour button if you want to come and spend the day with us. So today we've got the second of the three-part series on how to build your dream team to build your dream home. And I've got Katie Story, who I've done quite a few events with in the past, so thank you for being here. She is of Story Design and the founder of the Good Future Design Alliance. We will open this up to Q&A at the end, so hold your questions till then, put them in the chat box, and Katie will read them out at the end of the conversation. Okay, Katie, all you.
Great. Thank you, Simran, as always. Hi, so I'm Katie Story. I am principal of Story Design, a design firm here in San Francisco, and also the founder of the Good Future Design Alliance, which is an industry-wide alliance aimed at significantly reducing our waste in the industry. I'm really excited to be here today, which, like Simran said, it's the second out of a three-part series. And today we're really going to kind of dive into this question I think so many of these viewers want to know is like, how do you build your dream team to build your dream project? Because we've all been on projects where we don't have a dream team, and you learn a ton from those projects. But what we're hoping to do today is really dig in with our panelists, hear their knowledge, hear what works. They're all incredibly brilliant professionals. And I have tons of questions to start. Like Simran said, we'll keep questions from the audience till the end, but I'm going to dig right in. So I'd like to welcome, we have Greg Cook from Cook Construction. We have Glenda Flame of Butler Armsden Architects. We have Jenny Rios. There she is. We have Lauren Nelson of Lauren Nelson Design. Brian Koch of Terra Firma Landscape. And welcome, everyone. So first off, I'm going to start with you, Lauren. So when you get your dream client or your dream project, which from the looks of it, you have many because your work is so beautiful. They all seem like dream projects. But when you get them, what do you do? What's the very first thing you do?
Once we've signed on with them?
Yeah. Maybe after having like champagne, what is like your action? What do you do?
We dive into basically the learning process. So there's a lot of intake and we try to understand them as best we can. So we ask lots of questions, we go to their home, we understand how they live and, what's their family like, or do they have a family? Just all the ins and outs of day-to-day life. And then we dive into the fun part, which is all the inspiration. So we basically kind of get a sense of what their aesthetic is, if they have a strong one. If they don't have a strong one, then we come to the table with some ideas, but it's usually a mix. And
how often, I'm curious, like how often is it your aesthetic, or do clients come with like a whole Pinterest board ready for you?
I think the gathering of images now is so easy that most clients have some collection of imagery to work from, but a lot of clients come to us they've seen projects of ours that they like, and so they'll give those as examples of, let's go more in this direction, because we do have quite a range of styles. But yeah, I would say we get the full gamut of people that do have a strong sense of this is what we want, or people that more just say, okay, I'll leave that up to you. So I think the sweet spot for us is where there is some perspective and point of view, but they really look to us for the vision. Yeah.
And do you ever find, because this work is so personal, right? You're in people's kitchens and bathrooms and bedrooms. Do you discuss that pre-contract or during, like, when do you let them know how involved and intimate the relationship is?
Yeah, I always like to discuss it pre-contract just to make sure we're on the same page. And just to make sure styles align, because I think, as you probably know, there's some projects where you get into it far enough where you realize maybe there's not, there's a bit of a disconnect. And so it's always nice to just get aligned from the beginning. And there's always going to be elements that you might push harder than others, but I think it's always nice to have that conversation early on. Because I think part of what we do, it is so personal. And I think there needs to be just a nice connection from the beginning where you feel like you click versus having it be a little bit less aligned.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
That's great. Jenny, I want to hop over to you for a second because I didn't know what an owner's rep was until a few years ago. And when I first heard about this role, I thought it sounded so cool. And I was pretty bummed that I actually chose to design instead of be an owner's rep. But I think there might be some people who don't know exactly like what that entails. So can you shed some light on like your day-to-day and what role you play in developing the dream team?
Sure. My background is I used to be an owner's rep for a public agency. So in that scenario, you're representing the owner's best interest from the perspective of the whole picture, from choosing the design team, choosing the construction team, all of the tricky parts, the bidding and negotiation between design and construction, move in, close out, occupancy, all of those aspects. So, I mean, I am a certified construction manager and I do a lot of budget and schedule stuff and try to keep a project on track from a construction management perspective. But it's the real heart of it for me is really just understanding what's important to the owner and really like advocating for them throughout the whole process for their priorities, their goals and priorities.
And do you advocate for who to hire?
Occasionally, yeah. I mean, not every time. I'm brought in at different times. Sometimes, rarely am I brought in before the architect, but oftentimes the owner will ask for. Certainly, I have helped with a lot of contractor selection.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And speaking of the construction, so Greg, so Jenny's talking about navigating like the projects. How do you, like the communication between the designer, architect, and general contractor is so key, right? It's so crucial to the success of a project. It can make or break a project, really. So how do you ensure that it goes smoothly to the best of your ability? And then like when it veers off course, maybe you have Jenny, but if you don't, what do you do?
I think it really starts depending upon when a team is actually put together or how they're put together. I think that is like the level of success. That's where it really starts. There's a lot of different ideas about when a contractor is brought on, or when a project, or when a contractor is brought on, or how you bid out a project. All of those kind of really coincide with kind of the success of a project from inception to construction and to completion. It really depends. We're really more of a construction project management company than we are. We have a GC license, and that's part of it. But the difference is that we really kind of piggyback on what Jenny does in terms of really trying to work on schedules and pricing exercises. We really want to get in early to better understand who our client is, because not every contractor is right for every client, right? So we're trying to interview up front. We're trying to get into pre-construction early so that we can help guide the process through even prior to construction. I think a lot of times people rush into construction so much that they don't really understand how involved they need to be and how long that process should take prior to starting construction process. So I think oftentimes projects really go awry when you miss that first step. I think we've through COVID, we've had an opportunity to kind of slow things down quite a bit, where we can't just rush in. We can't just get over the counter permits and start demoing homes. And so it's given us an opportunity to really kind of talk to homeowners and get a better understanding of who they are. Very similar to Lauren, right? Where you kind of walk in and you're trying to understand what the homeowner's needs are. And we're trying to do the same thing. Like we often say we don't make the prices, we just gather them and try to educate you on why they are what they are. So hopefully that kind of answers that.
Yeah, no, that's great. It is kind of interesting how with COVID, it slowed down our pace. Certainly lead times are incredibly long and like some things are not even available. But I guess one of the bright spots of this whole pandemic is that it's been able to slow the process. So you can have moments for like more communication and understanding with clients. Like there's nothing we can do about it. I mean, maybe that's changing now with the pandemic getting better, but in the thick of it, there was nothing we could do other than just be with our clients and like better understand like their sticking points and, you know, how they were dealing. So it's a good point that you bring up. Okay, great. I love this. I have so many extra questions, but I'm going to stay focused here. So Glenda, on to you. I get this question a lot, and so I'm curious what your approach is of how to determine who to work with. People ask me when I'm signing up for a project, like, do I require that I work with such and such team? How do you handle this? I guess, do you require working with special teams? And if not, how do you, with the client, like figure out who to work with? What are your criteria for selecting the dream team?
Yeah, no, it's a very interesting question. It's a very good question. So no, we don't require for a client to use a specific team, because I think we have a strong belief that there is not one team that is the perfect team for every client. Every client is so different and in their approaches, in their priorities, and is really guiding them through that process of discovering who they are and then helping them choose the rest of the team, right? We're usually one of the first one to come on board. Sometimes we come on board before someone has even bought a property. Like, you know, we help walk through with them and kind of get ideas of either if it's just a parcel, like what can it be, or if it's a, you know, remodel, extensive remodel, we know what is doable, what can be done, and so that process really informs like who would be the other perfect partner to create that team, because ultimately it is very, very crucial. Like there is like a lot of like the true schedules and decision and sequencing that is very important. But if the team per se is not, if not everyone on the team is having the same goal in mind, it just makes it really, really hard for the process for the project to be successful and for the process to go smoothly. So
yeah. So it's not just about the financials of a project. It's really about fit and style.
I will say, you know, it depends which people you are putting together. If you're talking about the geotechnical engineer, probably most clients are like, you know, sign up the person that you think, you know, will be on time and on budget, right? Or, you know, that has experience with this type of sites or things like that. Like they will heavily rely on us just because they virtually will not have any contact with literally with the geotechnical engineer. A lot of time with the structural engineer, you know, some clients like to get into that, but in general, I will say, you know, they don't particularly care. But you know, in elements are more.
Can everyone please mute?
A handful of areas. I say that knowing that we have the opportunity.
There we go. Great. Okay, sorry, Glenda. Go on.
No worries. But I think the core team that has a very heavy design and visual impact to the project, it is very important to have like, you know, a good fit with the client. Besides, of course, the financial parameter, the schedule parameters, all of those are important. But they are, in a way, they go into a second. They're not as important if you actually don't have the right fit.
Totally. And one other thing on that is like, so the right fit, and I guess like the right availability and communication style, because site meetings are such a big part for all of us, like in making things flow smoothly. So I suppose that's a big part of it too.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, we have project where we have clients that come to every single site meeting, and we have project where clients has never come to one site meeting, and then anything in between that. So there's definitely the site meeting, I feel, is like where the design and the construction team kind of come together and really problem solve and push the design forward and the construction forward. And I think they kind of like, the more design meeting is where you have the true interaction with the clients about like, what are your really goals? What are your goals? What are your dreams? You know, what do you really want to from this project? Yeah. We get a lot of clients that are saying, we want this to be our forever home. So it's a big responsibility. You really want to understand who that person is when that, you know, when it gets put to you in those terms.
Totally. I think about that a lot, of like the amount of like power and privilege this industry holds in creating built environments. That's not meant to sound like precious. It's just like, we're designing and building and influencing cities, buildings, like campuses, all of that. It's like it's a huge role. And so again, another testament to like finding this dream team and creating dream homes or dream offices for people. It's so fun. It's so valuable to get it right. I'm going to move on to Brian. So oftentimes the landscape kind of gets overlooked and left out.
You mean last, Katie? We're covering landscape last?
Well, I know, right? That does not bode well. I should have started with you. But anyway, okay, so there you go. Landscape goes last. We run out of time. We run out of budget. So how, unless you have, again, Jenny advocating for you, which maybe you do, that would be great, right? I suppose. But if you don't, how do you make sure that your very important part of this doesn't get overlooked and doesn't get skimped? Like, how do you hold the line? When do you get involved? Do you get involved like 3 years early when they check out the site? Or just, can you like fill in some of the holes for how this works?
Sure. I appreciate the question. Thank you, Katie. And I guess, you know, there's a few questions in there that you asked. I guess if I could summarize the awareness on the landscaping, that's one real positive out of this, you know, COVID pandemic that we've gone through is just an overall appreciation for outdoor space. And it's been great for the landscape, and it's great for people to realize, you know, the outdoor space is so important. It's so vital to families, to people's well-being, their health, and having that connection of the inside tying into the outside. And it's just been a great trend. When I got into the business like 26 years ago, you know, people barely even paid attention to the landscape. It was all about grass. And it's just so neat over the time to just see this appreciation and how important the outdoor space is. And so that's been great. And I think a lot of it comes with experience and, you know, being able to appreciate, like if you're doing a project, whether you started off with a small home or a condo, but just slowly, eventually, a lot of our clients, our most troubled clients, come to us and they say, I'm going to do it right the second time. And we just wanted to move into our house and get the landscaping in, and it ended up being a disaster. And so we have a lot of clients, right, you know, who just now realize it through experience. With regards to like when we get brought on, the best projects in all honesty are the ones where architects and landscape architects and GCs are brought on super early. Whether, like Glenda had said, it's building that dream team, whether it's a parcel of land, and you know, you get that right team together who, you know, share in, I guess, common thoughts and processes and ideas and inspiration. And that's where, you know, the best projects are, where we're in there early, collaborating with architects and with the GC. GCs can bring things to the table like access and staging and phasing that are really important that, you know, we may need to think about. And architects are just wonderful on helping site. We can work together. But it doesn't always happen that way, Katie. You know, there are those situations where it's the house is already framed and it's sometimes you have to pivot with the landscape to try to solve something that was unanticipated. But you know, it's really, the process is fun on the landscape because it's, people realize how important it is, and people are realizing now, like, you know, that it's a high priority. But the nature of the game is landscaping is always the last, literally the last thing to go in on almost any project. And so if I could change one thing, it would be take the landscape budget and put it in a safe and just bury it somewhere on the property so that we can access it when the landscaping is ready.
Totally, yeah. I mean, that is, I mean, yards and outdoor spaces, right? Clearly, they have taken off during this COVID time. Like, I think back a year ago, I thought everything was dead. And I didn't expect any of this rebound in design, build, landscapes. Maybe I'm not a good like predictor of things, but I was so focused on like the death and the dying. Like I wasn't imagining this like growth and especially of like outdoor spaces, right? But I think that's what people really gravitated towards. Like we needed living things, we needed to like harness something. And so I'm sure that's
great. You're seeing, Katie, you're seeing this creative, people are just improvising and they're, you know, they're creating gardens on fire escapes. And, you know, it's like this, it's been really great. It's a great movement, the gardening, the spending time outdoors. So I think we're on a great wave and I hope it continues.
Yeah, for sure. And how often does, this is kind of for anyone, but staying on you, Brian, like how often does your landscape design mimic or reflect the interiors or the design of the building? Like how essential is that to clients or to you? And anyone can chime in.
I'll just give my quick 2 cents and then I can hand it over to the other experts. I just think collaboration is so fun. It's such, you know, like, again, going back to having that right team and in the interior, in the landscape, just should be talking just like interior in the architecture. But it's really fun when we are sharing our landscape at early stages with interior designers. And we have all this like patio and outdoor space, and we're sometimes scratching our heads like, wait a minute, we got a dining area here and a dining area over there. You know, it starts becoming, you know, hey, we need to team up with an interior designer. So it actually sort of, sometimes if the team is put together early enough, which I think it's the right way to build your dream home, is you've got to, you know, meet your people, feel like you have a connection, put that team together, and then we can collaborate. Even at a schematic level, we can start to talk and how outdoor spaces would be furnished. Maybe material choices is something that is really important. Stone has huge lead times now. And you got to start talking about natural stone or concrete or whatever the materials in the landscape, they have to align with the interior. So I'll hand it over to see if anyone wants to chime in.
Well, I think I want to say one quick thing. I feel like, you know, well, first of all, landscape as also the like landscape architect. So I think there is already a connection there. But especially in California, I feel like there is such a strong, like everybody loves this indoor outdoor living, and that's like a big feel of like everyone's home. And if those two designer that thinks, or the architect that thinks of the inside and the outside are not thinking together, then that connection between the indoor and the outdoors and this wonderful idea of the indoor outdoor living doesn't really come to fruition. So it's kind of is very important for that to be created and to be executed at the same time.
Sure. Yeah. And I imagine you pick your teams, like you pick the landscaper whose style would reflect the direction of that the home is being designed in.
Yes, for sure. And I think we're also versatile. There's not like one style that any of us do. It's maybe except for very few architects or for very few landscape architect. I think it is really having that vision for that project that you're just going to want to bring together and then really execute together is what is going to make that dream team.
Yeah, and I would say on a construction end of things, it is often that homeowners are thinking of landscaping as the phase 2 of what is already a large project. But there's so many elements that go into building or supplying the needs for landscaping that people need to think about up front. How much water the landscaping is going to need, what kind of structural retaining walls are being designed from the architect that need to be incorporated in the landscape design. Even to the logistics of if landscape architects are brought in late, then we're already and you've spent a year and a half with your architect designing your home, why wouldn't you give the same amount of time and respect to the landscaping on the exterior of the home? And often those landscape architects are brought on so late in the game, and now we're asking for things from Brian's firm that he would have loved to have planned out, like where the irrigation valves need to go, or where the main water supply needs to be run, or the gas lines. And now we're like, Brian, I know you were just hired on to do this project, but we need these answers tomorrow. And and oftentimes we have a project right now where the landscape architect was just brought on, and we're trying to pour retaining walls in the back of this property, and we're trying to future plan for the landscaping as opposed to incorporating it in with the architectural design. And that's really hard, especially when you're on a construction project where you're trying to keep timelines and keep budgets in place. All of those little things kind of really come to head and run into each other really quick.
Yeah, it's definitely something that happens in particular in an urban environment. Sure. I think in San Francisco, when you have a specific lot and people tend to have the landscape as an afterthought, and then you have problem of accessibilities, utilities cannot, are very hard to be run. So it is definitely something that the earlier you think about it, the better, for sure.
Katie, I would just add that, on behalf of the owner, I always advise owners, I'm like, think about how you want to live and what's really important to you, and how you want to feel when you come home every day, how you entertain, what your casual life is like, what your, how do you want to live? And then let's design for that. It's not really, I love that everybody on the team is getting into the nuts and bolts and all the, they're all so qualified in their respective fields, but remember, we're building homes for the owner, right? So it's super important to keep the owner at the center of what are we doing all of this for? It's for the people to have a long-term enjoyment of the home. So that's the soft side. Obviously there's a ton of nuts and bolts that go into it, but I think if you start there, you'll end up in a good spot. If I was going to advise an owner, I would say, let's think really hard about how you want to live and how you want to move through your home and landscape.
Good point, Jenny. That's great.
It's a really good point. It's just how you try and stay focused as you navigate your career or your business or whatever, right? You have to figure out what matters to you or your family or how you want to live, and just keep coming back to that. Stay true to that. And then as all these excellent professionals come in with their information, then you can hold strong and well, we know we want this, or we know this is how we want to live, and maybe take some of your ideas or all of them, but at least know where the decisions are grounded in. That's a really good point.
Yeah. And if I could piggyback a little bit on that, Katie, too, is Jenny's right. We gotta deliver for our clients. And what Greg shared at the last CANOPY event, which I thought was really you know, helpful, especially for anyone who's out there trying to build their dream home, is sort of this budget alignment. You know, general contractors usually, like Greg said, they just get stamped with a like, what do you mean it costs this much? And I do think that, you know, we want to deliver for our clients and get them what they want, their home, their dream home, but it also costs money. And that what we're learning here about what Greg and Jenny have said, it's a process, right? Like Greg is managing this whole process of building a home, and budget is it's like almost number one. Greg, I mean, you could probably share a little bit of insight. So it's the elephant in the room is like, as great as the dream team is and all these great things we're doing, at the end of the day, it's costing, these projects have budgets. And I think that's an important step to be doing. The theme at the last event was do it early, get this uncomfortable discussion about cost and budget right away, so that we can deliver for our clients, get them what Jenny wants, like the house that they're going to live in, but making sure the whole team is aligned on how do we stay on this budget to make it work.
Jenny, I would almost ask, like, I'd assume if you're brought on early, you're having a lot of these these real conversations with the homeowners when they're because I'm assuming they have to open up to you and say, this is the budget.
I sort of take the position of I'm going to be the most honest person and sometimes that means I get to be really unpopular, right? So like I have to give the unpopular or the unsavory news of like what things cost or, schedule and all of the logistics. But like if an owner comes to me and says, these are the most important things to me, I'm going to hold on to those and I'm going to fight for those things, right? So now if you're changing your mind if you're changing your mind a lot, it's really hard. But I really, in order for me to advocate for the owner, I have to know what's important to them. So it's one of the very first things that we talk about is like, I understand you can't have budget, schedule, and quality and everything custom all at the same time. So we really like talk through a lot of that. And so, yeah, I mean, those are the early discussions. And when it comes to selecting the team, I guess my three things are I look for qualifications first. Do you have similar relevant experience? I look for capacity. Obviously, I don't want to hire somebody that's qualified but overcommitted and can't really do the work. And then I look for team chemistry. So I'm looking for like, does the client trust? Does the client feel comfortable with that team? Super important about just not only the chemistry with the client, but the chemistry with the team. So those are probably, if I were to say the three most important things is like qualifications, that's requirement. Capacity, you got to show me that you have the team to really do the work. And three is chemistry, because it's not quantifiable, but it's so important when you're in a rhythm and people are jamming, they can all do their job and work really well. That's a huge efficiency. And I could even argue that that's cost efficient.
Totally. I love how you just bulleted it for us, like the three things to look for in building the dream team. But it is so true, that chemistry piece, because I imagine, like I know I've been on projects where the architect is whatever, we're at a meeting and the architect is at a loss for a thought and then I chime in, or vice versa, and the architect creates an idea for me. So I guess that's a question. Does that happen to anyone else? Like in this concept of chemistry and like working together, like how often are you kind of cross or sharing ideas across sector a little bit and across specialty?
I think it's great. I would encourage collaboration at any level, at any point in the process, Katie. I mean, we've had some great, really, even at those site meetings that we talked about, the OAC, owner, architect, contractor meetings, where you're walking around, whether it's pouring foundations or it's a punch list, like there are always, ideas that are popping up. And I think it's great when people speak up, even if it's an idea that it doesn't get any reaction or any positive reaction. it could spur a sort of a satellite idea or a splinter off a similar idea in a different location. So I love it. I encourage it.
I definitely think for a project to feel like cohesive and holistic, those lines have to be blurred a little bit. No one can say, and my design ends here, and your design ends over there, and my design is over there. All of that needs to really come together organically. So there's definitely a lot of like cross-pollination, I guess, of the different disciplines on the successful teams and projects.
Yeah, I will chime in as well. I feel like the connection where you have those site meetings and you're with the whole team, I think those are so valuable. And I think with COVID, some of that was pared down, where there was less interaction, and I missed that. You know, like I feel like when on those projects where we really are doing weekly site meetings still, I think those just run more smoothly. I think ideas come up, you know, certain things change each week, unexpected construction things come up and you solve them. And I think there's just that opportunity for all different disciplines to connect. And I think those are when the best solutions come out versus everyone behind their computer and trying to figure things out from a two-dimensional plan, you know? So I'm looking forward to just being physically in the same space on across all projects, like in the coming years. Because I think this last year was it just threw us all for a little bit of a loop.
Yeah. I mean, I think some were already designing virtually, but for those who weren't, it was like the biggest leap to take on virtually and not see your clients and not really get, because what you're just talking about, Lauren, is like that magic moment on site where maybe you had designed something that you thought was really cool, but then on site you've come up with something like even better. And that happens all the time, right?
Yeah.
So, especially when there's a really good team involved.
Right.
I would say go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, I just think there's something about being in that physical space that does spark ideas, and often better ideas than when you were not in the space. You know, you can say, oh, the light at this time of day is so amazing right here. Like, let's move this wall. And I don't know, there's just different circumstances that physicality is just really important in conjunction with being with the contractor and being with the architect and being with the landscaper.
Mm-hmm.
So sorry, go ahead, Greg.
No, it's all right. What I would say is that, you know, I feel as though the GC spot is not necessarily to change design. That's not what we're there for. We're really there to help collaborate in terms of how to build design or build your design, right? To collaborate through the nuances of all of the details and the construction phases. But like, we're not there to change the design. That's not what we set on site to do. We're there to collaborate in order to make sure that, like, hey, have you thought about building it this way? Or what about if we add this other piece? And like, I think that's where us all getting in those OAC meetings and kind of talking through the details of what a project really needs is amazing. And I do agree, it is, this last year has been challenging in terms of, you know, we're on site with a phone and we're trying to like zoom in the interior designer or the architect to show them like, hey, had you thought about this one like current situation that you may not have thought about? And it's really, really tough to get into a collaborative zone over a Zoom call when you can't physically touch those spaces. So I really look forward to getting back into those weekly meetings.
Oh my gosh, I know. Or like holding up materials that are like horrible screen colored and you're like, does this look good? I promise it does. And they're like, no, it doesn't.
What do you think about this layout? Can you see it?
Yeah, exactly. Like, what color is that? I don't know. Yeah, clearly we're all ready to like get back out there. So, okay, it's like 3:40. We're doing great. But so I have a couple more questions and they're starting to roll in. So if anyone in the audience wants to put in a question, we're going to start opening up to the Q&A part. But so going back to like the cost piece that Jenny, you kind of were speaking to, and I guess this is maybe for Jenny and Greg, but anyone can answer. Like, clearly we live in one of the most expensive places to do construction. Costs are out of control here. Some clients understand that and have no problem with it, but how do you communicate with clients the reality of project creep? And like, how transparent are you with like what is costing what? Or is it just like, here's a change order or your new bill is going to be this? Like, how detailed are you with the client on cost expectations and changes?
You want me to take that first, Greg? Or you gonna take it? It's all me, huh? Well, I encourage clients to make their big decisions, their biggest, most expensive decisions before starting construction. So it's really the most expensive time to design is when you're in construction. That's what I say. So when you're in construction, like Lauren, and she's like, we should move a wall. I'm like, we should not move a wall. We should not move a wall. Yeah, so I really encourage to have as much of a complete design as a developed design. It'll never be complete, but a developed design before starting construction. And I actually advise clients, I'd like to have in my perfect world, I'd like to have a minimum of 60% cost known before starting. It doesn't always happen. You know, I think before COVID, everybody was designing as they go. There was this big push to hurry up and start and figure out the design along the way. And that was okay. And I think there was a silver lining, cut to the silver lining for COVID, which was we all got to like reset, take a break, catch up, take a deep breath, and like hopefully get a little bit more organized and like build in some process and some better best practices for finishing design before we start construction. So I think the best cost savings measure is to get a developed design before you start construction. And then beyond that, I'm super honest about what things cost because time is money, and the majority of cost, frankly, is in labor more so than materials. So I have a bunch of tools and rules of thumb and ways to guide through that, but those are the big picture ideas.
I fully agree. I think that the fact that we've been able to slow down and really design the home, I think a lot of the time when homeowners are not educated enough to understand the amount of detail that goes into building a home. I can't even tell you the amount of times that I've said like a CD set or a construction document set of buildable drawings, and the homeowner will look at you like, what do you mean? Like, you can't build off of these floor plans? Like, this is it. I thought we were done. And the amount of like details and the level of detail that we all on this panel go into when building a home. And a lot of the time we are pushed to doing it, or pushed to start a project prior to solving those problems. Now, regardless, you're going to have those problems come up especially in remodels in San Francisco, but you'll even have those in new construction projects. There's no level of detail that you will have thought out before starting construction. But ideally, the more time, at some point you need to start your project. Homeowners just can't continue to pay to have details drawn and not really see anything in the ground or building out of the ground. But if you can spend the time to work through those details and work through pricing exercises up front, you will save time and money throughout the construction project. I don't think any of us can change whether a homeowner changes their mind halfway through a project and wants to add an addition or, move walls, for example. But I mean, if they can make a lot of those decisions up front prior to starting a construction project, I think you will stay on budget from the start of the project and as well as on time. And I think any kind of time slippage is where projects really, the finances get away from them, is when time starts to slip.
I would echo that, Greg, by just saying that invest your time in the programming, get the programming right. And by programming, I mean square footage, get the square footage right. Like, don't make changes to square footage if you can, once you start construction.
Like, don't add an extra.
Like, spend the time, make sure you, I mean, I've had clients that start with 15,000 and then go back, they're like, that they get the price tag, they come down to 10,000 square feet, then that seems a lot more comfortable. Or, you know, but like, understand how you want to live. What's the square footage? That's the most important thing. It's the most expensive thing, and it's the most impactful thing. So get the program, get the square footage right. Don't worry, don't sweat the details that much, but the program needs to be on point. Like, you don't want to regret that halfway through.
Right. Yeah.
I do think that there is one thing that every client should remember is the most expensive time to design. It is during construction. What you said, Jenny, is very, very, very true. So it's as much as you can design and be comfortable with the design and embrace it before construction starts. And the details can come and can be figured out during construction, but as much as of the infrastructure of the spaces, as much of that can be set in stone, I think the better and the smoother and the more efficient the project is going to be.
That's great.
Well, that it also ensures the more you can design ahead of time, it ensures that it's bid correctly, you know, as far as the finishes and everything. I think a lot of the questions we get is, are we bringing you on too early or too late? And I think the ideal situation is that the architect has done their work and then the design development has also been started to give it a sense of, are we talking, you know, our finish is going to be up here or down here? And I think expectations and reality can be different. So I think the more you can design ahead of time, the more the bid just comes in where it should be versus too low, or usually too low or too high.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I totally agree with that. And Jenny, I think you're right of like just being really honest the whole way through, rather than like lowballing or like having too high of a bid. It's just like, kind of, what is it going to cost? Prepare the client like mentally for that. It's a great way to start. Okay, so I have a few here. Gosh, there's some good ones, but I don't know if we'll get to all of them. But okay. Okay, so what trends are you all, this is for everyone, are you all seeing brought on by the pandemic that you think are going to stay? Like, and I guess an extension of that is like, so what trends are here to stay, and what trends did you work on this last year, if any, that are related to the pandemic? Like new offices, ADUs, I guess lots of yards for you, Brian, but.
Yeah, we've been getting really creative with the use of outdoor space, especially on our city urban projects where, you know, you've got folks that don't have a large yard, but, you know, lots of programming. So we're talking about, you know, outdoor gathering, a lot of, you know, folks really want to be outside gathered around a fire pit. I think that, you know, that COVID has sort of brought that to the surface, and people enjoy being outside. And so you can get creative on designing and developing the spaces to work with the client's needs. And especially in San Francisco, I mean, it's a never ending battle trying to create warm environments in San Francisco.
How many BTUs is that fireplace, Brian? I'm gonna need to know that.
Yes, a lot.
Well, and wind screening.
Yeah, exactly. Wind screening. So I would say, you know, Katie, like just from a landscape perspective, a lot of low water use, with the trend away from sprinklers and lawns has been great, because the state really could use water conservation. So the turf technology, and when I say turf, that's the artificial turf. The turf technology is so fantastic now, and it's just, you know, it's just changing a lot of people's lives with regards to usability all year round. You know, active active kids, active families. It's super valuable. And then the plant choices that are available now that use less water and that are successful, create privacy and beautiful aesthetics. So it's been great on the landscape side. Lots of innovation.
That's great to hear.
I think in the home side, as a general trend, it's like one of the big things before, when you were creating someone dream homes, was like, how do you live? How do you entertain? And the entertaining was a really big part. And I think now there's kind of the two focuses. There is definitely the entertaining part, but there is also how do you have your own personal space within the home? And so kind of creating this own kind of like spaces that are inside the home, but you feel away from the home, are becoming very, very, very important, and just kind of more private and personal space for each individual of the family.
I second that.
Yeah. I know, where's that private hideout?
Yeah. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, totally. Okay, great. There are a couple more. I'm gonna start jumping topics a little bit, even though I do love the changes from the pandemic. But going back to cost, this is a hot topic for people. So for homeowners who like have never renovated before, or maybe are new to San Francisco, like how do you justify and explain the cost of a project when like they really don't have any ideas? Like, how do you handle that?
Well, I start with a cost per square foot. I've heard rumors that people have said, oh, we can build at $500 a square foot. And I said, that's just not possible in San Francisco. I've talked with somebody who did it really, really low. That was a developer, and it was with all materials that nobody here would ever choose. So that's not consumer grade materials. It's really, but like when you're in the custom residential, it starts at 800, and I mean it can get down to 700. It doesn't happen by accident. You have to really try hard and be focused on getting to that. It does not happen by accident. So, you know, most projects would budget around $1,000 a square foot. Obviously, it goes the sky, you know, a lot higher than that. I won't scare people away too much, but $1,000 a square foot is a decent starting point, especially for kitchens and bathrooms, depending on the size and complexity of the project. But that's kind of baseline in San Francisco. Beyond that, I can talk more, but that's really the baseline.
And as Jenny said, you know, if you get the cost down, if you start lowering your budget, then you're giving up quality of work, quality of installation, or you're giving up timing. You know, you're going to get someone who's over capacity, like Jenny stated, and it'll either fizzle out or never get done or take forever, and that's problematic too. But mostly it's the quality. If cost has to go down, then you're going to lose somewhere else.
Yeah. A good point.
Yeah, a lot of time when cost is an issue, I think at that point you want to be a little more creative and think about how can the project be phased, right? Is the scope of work really, do everything that has been designed need to be there? So it's really, you really want to reduce the scope, because otherwise something else is going to suffer, and you really don't want to have, you know, this mismatch.
I'd rather say like do it right or don't do it at all. So I'd rather do a smaller scope and then phase out and do other work in time, rather than biting off too much and then ending up with something that you're really not proud of.
And Greg made a good point at the last CANOPY event, is like, you know, to advise a new homeowner, I think it's early on at schematic level. You get a great team, you get your architect who has their drawings, you get a landscape architect with the landscape, and then you involve a general contractor and probably an owner's rep too, because better to bring them on early than late. The idea is that at a schematic design, you know, with the right team, you can really nail down a budget to really understand, okay, how much is this going to cost? And then when you find out it's 2x what you thought, or 1.5x or whatever it is, better to do the VE adjustments at a schematic level, get it right, and then go through the whole permit set of drawings and consultants and engineers and such. Because if you make the VE decision too late in the game, it's gonna the cost will spiral.
Well, and that's the most painful thing too. It's so heartbreaking when you're like, oh, I can't cut 30 to 40% cost out of this. It's just not possible. I can cut 10% out. I can't, without reducing square footage, I can't take out 30 to 40% of the cost. It's just not going to happen. So anyway, if anybody wants to talk to me about cost.
I know. Well, that sounds great. I think we probably all need to, but okay, we just have a couple minutes, and I want to know from each of you, like, you don't necessarily need to name names, but do you have a dream team in mind, and are you working with them currently or planning to? What's your current state of affairs, like, in this discussion around dream team? Are you living the dream with your team?
There's lots of dream teams, Katie.
Yeah.
We have like 8 or 10 different dream teams.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Good answer.
I'll say this, I don't have anybody that I'm working with that I would prefer not to be working with. Like, I genuinely enjoy all of my teams and all of my clients, and like 100%. So I'm
Amazing.
consider myself extremely fortunate.
I was gonna say, I think that's not common. I mean, you're the unicorn. No, I can answer. I mean, we just finished a project where we had a really great team, and starting with the client was just fantastic. She hired a great GC. She hired us, and I just think the whole team it was very smooth, and it made such a difference. So we've had a few other projects that are just where everyone's synced up. I would say the majority of ours are like that, but then there's some that, if there's one member of that team that just isn't, on the same level, it slows down the project. It makes a lot of fire drills, and it's harder. So I won't name names, but it's really, really nice. It's those days when you feel like, this is why I do what I do. The clients are happy and the team's happy.
Yeah, I would say that I think that we all, depending on who's brought on first, the first thing we start to do is build those teams in our head. Who do we think the client's going to connect with? Who do we think it has the kind of the same style as maybe this client is looking for, the price point that this client is looking for? What are the needs of the client? And then I think we all have many dream teams that we would love to work with or can collaborate really well with. And I think ultimately you're trying to hopefully make positive recommendations to a client to allow them to build what you hope to be a dream team. You hope that they listen to your recommendations of who should be on the team and why. And if they connect with those people and they allow you to build that dream team with a couple of those recommendations, I think that's when everything connects, everything works well. And that's when, the client's happy at the end of the project, and we're all having toasts at the end of the project, as opposed to, other situations. And I think recommendations up front and clients' trust in your recommendations, but also their own due diligence in getting an understanding of who they are and getting an understanding of their aesthetic and so on and so forth is really what helps build the team to be a successful team at the end of the project.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Greg. It really is. There isn't we're kind of going full circle. Now we're saying there isn't really one dream team. There are many of them, but the important part is that everyone, from the clients to to anyone else on the team, really be on the same page and just feel connected and have that chemistry, and really have what are the priority of the project at heart and very clear for everyone. Like clarity on what priorities are is probably one of the most important elements.
We guys, this is great. We are at time, and I think I'm supposed to end on time. We're actually a few minutes over, but thank you everyone for showing up and attending. It looks like we have a great turnout. I hope this was really helpful. I know it was for me. So, I mean, it sounds like our takeaways are like plan early, plan wisely, be thoughtful and be patient, be communicative with your clients. And then Jenny's look for qualification, capacity, and chemistry. I love that. Jenny, I think I'm going to come to you for like numbers, like bullet point list about a lot to come to you for. But no, this is great. And I hope that everyone learned something and that you all get to, not just the panelists, but our viewers too, you get to like work with your dream team to build your dream home, whatever that looks like for you. And then we will see you on the panel 3. I don't know the exact date, or but look for that, be on the lookout. And thank you everyone for showing up.
Thanks so much for having us.
Okay,
everyone.
yeah.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Peter.
Good to
Bye.
see everyone.